Well, this is the last lecture of this lesson, and I feel like we've covered quite a bit of stuff. Maybe it's easy for you, but well, I'm going to try and cram in some more stuff anyways. And the things that I'm going to try and talk about in this lecture are JUnit, that's how you test your code, and static, that mysterious word static. Okay, so there's this way that my friend Betsy explains static. Using this marathon example that I like. She's a very clever lady. But the idea behind static is that there's only one shared by every instance. So you usually have an instance. Instance data is different for each instance. Okay, so now we can talk a little bit about why the main method is always static. That's because when you're starting this class, every class is going to start the same. Okay, the marathon thing, it goes like this. So we're going to have athletes. They're going to have some instance-specific data, and that will be their name and their speed, and then we're going to have some static data, and that's going to be the number of runners and the location of the marathon. Alright, so I'm going to just start, I do want a main method, and I'm just going to start by making some athletes. This is a kind of a backwards way to go about things, but it's going to become more familiar when we do test-driven development, which is coming soon. Athlete, you just want one athlete who's called John. John's here. John has a speed of 10, and then, well, we probably need, I'm going to call it Betsy in her honor, and she's a pretty competitive lady. Very good at tennis, but she would probably be faster than John, knowing her. Now, see, I'm doing this talking and typing thing at the same time, which leads me to make mistakes sometimes. I'm just chilling with this redness for now because I'm going to use it to auto-create the stuff. And when you guys are doing your minion exercise, which is what's coming next, you should not do it this way, because you need to actually understand and get familiar with making the class from first principles. Okay, so this has made a stub constructor. I think I'm going to keep going with the red. This name equals this speed. This is going to be pretty ugly, and I wouldn't ever write code like this. I would give them proper names, etc. But I just want to get this done. It's not really the purpose of the exercise. What I'm trying to show with this is how we use static. Because there are going to be certain things that are the same for all athletes. And those things are the location of the marathon. Also, well, let's just do that for the moment, and I'm going to do a little bit of testing to show you what the difference is between a variable that doesn't have the static and a variable that does have the static. So I'm going to print out some stuff. I'm going to print out John, and so this is going to give me gobbledygook, so I'm going to override the toString method. Do I want to do it like that? Yeah, I'm going to override the toString method and say return name speed. Okay, we've got John 10. And I'm going to put in the location. Okay, also. Okay, so we've got John 10 at null. Great. All right, so the location, I probably ought to set that. Create the method in there. That's going to make the stub for me. And then, go away. Then I'm going to set the location based on the string. And some sort of a funky character got in there. Okay, so here I'm setting John's location. And now we have a infinite loop, which is causing a Stack Overflow error. Woo-wee. Okay, so oops, I have the set location calling itself. I really just want this. I really just wanted to set this member variable location to location like that. You see the way it's at italics? That's because it knows that it's static. And static means that there's only one for every instance of the class. I'm about to show that to you now. Okay, so the thing is, we can also print out Betsy. Right, so look at that. Betsy's location is San Diego. And the reason that she already got set to San Diego is because the location was set here for John, but that actually influenced every instance of an athlete. Okay, so see what happens here. Betsy, set location to London. Do they have marathons there? I don't know, maybe it's too rainy. Betsy's in London, but look at this. If we move this down where John is being printed out, John is also in London. Okay, I hope I'm explaining this somewhat. The whole point is that the static variables are shared among all instances of the athlete class, no matter who they are. I'm going to take this a little further. So let's imagine that we actually want to use this to set the runner's bib numbers. Let's see, so we're going to have the bib number. The bib number is the number that they have on them when they run, and they should all be different. And we're just going to use, for simplicity, the next available number. So that means we need to take account of how many runners we have. Yeah, like that. Okay, so we have the info here. The bib number is going to pertain to each athlete separately, but the number of runners is going to be the same for all. And that's how we're going to track them. So every time I create a new runner in my athlete class, I'm going to increment the number of runners. And then I'm going to set the bib number to the number of runners. And to show you this working, assuming it works, which it may not, I'm going to print it out for each person. Plus bib number. All right, fingers crossed. Okay, so we have Betsy and John with different bib numbers. You might think it's strange that they're in the wrong order until you see where they were instantiated. See, John is instantiated first, he's number 1, and then Betsy's number 2. And then after we do all this, if we could print out the total number of runners, we would need a getter. It just returns that. and then I can do it from anything. I could do it from Betsy, and I'm going to get 2. I could do it from John, and I'm going to get 2. Or I could do it from athlete, and I'm not allowed to do that. Okay, so, but I would be allowed to do it if I made this into a static method. And we have 2. Okay, so what I'm trying to communicate in this is that you can have static variables that are shared among all instances, and then you have member variables, and those are specific to each instance of the object. Okay, so now we're going to try an exercise using that, which is called static ducks. Yes, so the deal with the static ducks is we want to count the number of creations so that we're able to get a count on it. Here we're making 4 ducks, and then we're going to check if they're created. But before you're able to do this, I'm going to need to show you a little bit about how these tests work, because this looks a little bit strange to you probably. Okay, so I'm going to make a test. Now I'm going to call it messing around with JUnit. Chumit. JUnit. It stands for Java unit. Then all the other languages have their own, like P unit is for PHP and C unit is for C#. But anyways, so the way you do a JUnit test is you do a test and then you do control space. I think I got the old one. I want the JUnit 4 one like that. Okay, this is how tests work. So you have this framework, and the way it works is you put it in an assert. An assert is going to compare 2 different things. The one we most frequently use is assert equals. And you can see it's nicely filled in this information for me. So the first part is what's expected, and the second part is what's actual. And then when I run this, I'm going to get a reading of whether my test passed or failed. You can probably glean that this test has passed. That's why I'm getting a green bar. But let's see a red bar. Okay, that's because those 2 are not equal, duh. But I'm just showing you now how the JUnit works. What you would usually do is here you're calling something on a class. So I might be doing something like math dot. What can we do that's cool that I know how to use? Floor. These are all so complicated. You know, I'm just going to make my own thing. I'm going to say 2 plus 2 in there, and I'm going to put 4 in there. Okay, so this is where you usually test your class, and this is the result. If those 2 things are the same, then you know your code's working. When you use this for a long time, you start to see this red bar in your nightmares. So I have to switch it back real quick. Okay, the deal for the ducks is that this is a test. I can run it. Of course, it's going to be red right now because it's not even compiling. Down here, it's telling me, no, it's not compiling. And by the way, this is not the same duck as the duck I had earlier. I just like ducks because I think that the name sounds funny. These ducks, the reason I know they're different is because they're being constructed differently, and that's why they're red. See, if I hover over it and I import that duck, oops, I was here already. So I already did that for kicks before while I was practicing. But the one that I showed you earlier didn't have a duck. I'm just after going in there before I started this video, and then I created a constructor that didn't have any parameters in there. But you guys are going to have to make your own duck. So this duck will have member variables for color, I guess. And you're going to have to figure out how to count the number of creations. That's the first test. And then the second test, you're going to have to figure out how to set the color of each duck to black or white depending on when they have been created. So this is to practice that static stuff I was just telling you about. And then the next exercise I'd like you to do is this thing called minion test. This is just to practice making constructors, making getters and setters, but I really recommend you do not touch this bulb, because it's going to do it all for you. If you really want to test and practice to see if you've absorbed anything that I've been rattling on about today, then you need to go like this. Make a minion class. Type stuff out. Type it. Don't touch the yellow bulb. For this particular exercise, that's cheating. Now, when you've done your best to make a constructor and do all that stuff for your minion, then you should be able to run this and you should get green bar. So you should get, there's 2 tests. If you want to just focus on one, sometimes what I do is just comment one of them out like that, and then you know which is running. Because if you have both of them, you're going to get a red bar even if one of them passes. So if you comment one out, then you know you're just working on this one for the moment and you can work on the next one later. But like I say, we'll be doing more JUnit later. It's just pretty handy for me to test out things. And in this case, these 2 tests are going to be checking whether you've made your constructor correctly and whether you've made your getters and setters correctly. And then when you have all that done, you're pretty much an expert on objects, on constructors, on getters and setters, and on how to make an instance of a class, how to break out of the main method. There's been quite a lot in this particular lesson, and it's all very important stuff, kind of like the last one. So take your time. It's important that you gain mastery over these things until we go to the next. And if you have questions, just don't be afraid to ask, because a lot of this stuff is not immediately obvious the first time you've done it. And probably I'm not doing a very good job of explaining. I'm trying my best, but it's the kind of information that you really learn by doing. All right, so go and do some doing with the minion and with the minions and with the ducks. And I'll see you all again in lesson 5.